Welcome to Emotionships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I'm your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my lovely co-host, Mallory Redmond. Why the eye roll?
That's so boring. Back to your roots.
Just every once in a while you got to get that in so people don't think you've stopped being lovely.
Oh, how sweet.
We're joined by a very
big day.
Very special guest here
Big
on
day.
the podcast.
Long awaited.
For those of you that are tuning into the video, you get to see this lovely face. For those of you that are still stuck on audio only, it's okay. But Jeff Goins is joining us here on Emotionships.
Applause.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hold on. Oh, it's built in.
All right.
Yeah.
Built-in
Good.
applause here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Episode 38.
Yeah.
Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Charlie. Good to be here. Hello, Mallory.
Hi.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. Happy to catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get you on the podcast finally after talking about it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
How are you? In from Nashville, Nash Vegas.
I am doing well. I have a little bit of a headache that I'm overcoming.
You're working through.
Yeah.
I'm working through, pushing through.
But apart from that, you look good.
Yeah, you look great.
Thank you.
Mallory, have I ever told you the first time I met Jeff?
I don't know. Tell me again.
I have no idea how.
I feel like does it involve Starbucks?
Yes.
Yeah,
There
okay.
is a Starbucks involved.
Go ahead.
I do not know how I originally found your blog, Goins Writer. And I reached out to him because I was reading his stuff and I thought, this guy is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do more people not know about him? And this is like 2011, 2012-ish. And so I just emailed him and said, hey, I'm in Nashville all the time. My dad lives there, and we're doing business there. Would there be a chance that we could sit down? I wanted to pick his brain about writing a book.
Yeah.
And we met at the Starbucks near Cool Springs in Nashville. And in walks this super nerd.
Yes.
Super.
It's true.
Yes.
I think he had a Star Wars t-shirt on.
Probably.
Okay.
He was just a super nerd.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one of the things that I'm very proud of that I told him that day, I'm like, dude, you are like the most underestimated person on the web.
Yeah.
And I think everything has moved in that direction now.
So what was the first date like? I mean, like, was it awkward?
No, not at all. You know what he told me? And I have these books. He gave me like 3 books to read, and he's like, listen, your head is so much in the business space. Like, before you even start trying to write anything, you need to start reading some fiction.
Oh, what great advice. And have you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I knew the answer to that.
What is the movies where there are 3 of them that you told me to read? It's a series.
Star Wars?
No. We're the. Oh shoot. Nevertheless, he gave me a lot of different fiction to read, and I did read some then at the time, and it was a very good point. But
I love this story because of how you like met with him and gave him gifts. He was just sort of like a fan.
I don't remember any of that.
Oh.
I remember
Really?
meeting him
Okay.
at Starbucks.
Clearly
Perfect.
it made an impact.
I remember meeting him at Starbucks. I remember being surprised by what I saw.
How would you describe him? He described you as a super nerd.
I don't remember. I don't think you had this sort of, whatever vibe you have going on now.
Whatever vibe this is.
I think it was like, he was more like Soccer Charlie.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Had a soccer meets pastor vibe.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I thought I was walking in on, was like a, I don't know, soccer player who has a church or something.
Yeah.
well, what I was wanting him to help me with was this idea of a book that I was fixated on as a pastor at the time.
Oh, that's right.
About bastard believers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I remember.
I forgot about that.
You did a blog series on that.
I did a whole series where I wanted to just debunk the idea of being a believer, that being a believer in and of itself doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
You can believe from a distance.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
Didn't turn into a book, though? Maybe because you haven't read any fiction.
I'm just warming up.
Yeah, gotta get lots of reps.
Yeah, for sure.
That's true.
And so that was the first date there at a Starbucks.
There it is.
So much has changed.
Mm-hmm. So much has
Give us an update about you.
Yeah, what are you working on? What are you doing? Tell us about your life.
What am I doing in this crazy year? You know, the first few months of the pandemic, I would do podcast interviews with people, and they would be like, "Don't talk about this because we don't know how long this is gonna last." And it's like, I think you kind of have to acknowledge it now.
Yeah,
you know, it's like don't talk about World War II. We don't know how long this is gonna last. Let's pretend it's not happening. Right. Same thing, basically. You know. Good. I'm good. What is going on with me? My business has changed a little bit this year. I ghost wrote a book 2 years ago for my friend Grant Baldwin. We wrote a book on how to become a public speaker. That opened this door.
Are you allowed to mention a name when you do ghostwriting?
That's what I was wondering.
It depends.
Do we need to edit that out?
It depends on the contract. This
is a good one.
This book has my name on the cover, so I think I can say that I wrote it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then what makes it a ghostwrite?
Good question. It's a bit of a misnomer.
Okay.
If you ever see somebody, if you ever see a book where it's like by so-and-so, and then it says with somebody else, the with is the writer.
Gotcha.
So I guess I was just a writer on this book. I wasn't a ghost.
Yeah.
The way that we do that, my assistant and I, my partner and I, do that is it really just depends on the author. There are books that we as a team have written. We're working on 12 books this year. So that's the story. Went from 1 to 12 in about a year. It just kind of, it depends on the deal. Some books that make sense to put my name on the cover. Sometimes I don't want to put my name on the cover. Sometimes they don't want it. It depends on the nature of the project.
Sure.
But what a ghostwriter does, for the folks listening at home that don't know, is you typically take somebody else's ideas and or story and write the book as if you were them. So that's what we do. So I'm doing that and then getting ready to do a big rebrand with my work and going through a bunch of personal changes. I mean, we can talk about that too. Went through a divorce this year. And just kind of re-navigating life in a transitional season in an already weird year. So it's been an interesting year for me.
Yeah, no kidding.
And probably the hardest. I said this I think it was last year. I wrote a blog post about like the most hard, like the most difficult and transformative year of my life. You know how those went together. That was 2019, and I was like, well, I guess I got to double down and say that again. 2020.
I literally felt the same way.
No idea.
Like, oh, goodbye 2019.
Yeah, it's good.
Aren't we ready for you 2020?
Yeah, it's the year of rebuilding now, right? Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah.
I have learned, and I imagine you've learned this throughout your various business ventures, Charlie. But I have learned that when you go. Can't get any worse. It can always be a little bit worse.
Sure. Oh yeah.
It's like
don't say that.
Yeah, don't say that. Yeah, we've seen the worst of it.
No,
maybe not.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
Yep.
So, when we met, going all the way back to 2011-ish, you were a missionary at the time.
Yeah. That's right.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. I worked for a missions organization, I should clarify.
Okay. Yeah, missions organization, traveling though.
Yeah.
And going out on the road. Mm-hmm. And since we have been going down some of the same spiritual path, not at the same time, and really not even talking about it a ton. Here and there we talk about each other's journey. Before we get into that part of your spiritual journey, everybody listen. Well, not everybody. I guess if you're listening now, you haven't heard all of the episodes. But I had the story where I had a gummy and just had not really thought about it and ended up doing a wedding ceremony high.
It's a good story.
And Jeff and I connected several months ago. Was it here? Where were we?
Yeah, it was here.
Yeah.
And he had a similar story. Just with a gummy.
Are you wanting him to share the story, or are you just?
No, I was just getting ready. I was thinking about our similar journey into the realm of the unknown and being comfortable with what's uncomfortable. And I thought,
Being high in public.
we both had quite the adventure with our first gummy.
To be clear, I was in California.
Yeah.
It was completely legal. I had never had cannabis before.
I was in California too, just to be clear.
Common denominator.
And I mean, the short story is I took half a gummy. That was the recommended dose. I was like, this is fine.
2.5 milligrams.
My friend and I were getting ready to go out for dinner to this really nice Chinese restaurant in San Francisco. I was there for business, and then we're getting ready to go out. And like 20 minutes later, I was like, I'm just going to take the other half of it.
Oh,
and then
sure.
we went
Bad
out,
move.
Yep.
had a couple of drinks.
Yep.
And this has happened to me actually twice now.
Oh.
Blood pressure dropped,
Sure.
fainted, woke up. My friend was like, we got to go. And I was like, no, I'm fine. Fainted again. Like did this
in the restaurant.
Yeah. Like fell back in my chair, fell asleep basically for a minute, woke up, and I felt like I was dying at some point, real good stuff. And then by the third time this happened, he's like, we got to get out of here. And he had just ordered an $18 old fashioned. And I was like, you got to drink your cocktail. He's like, no, we got to get out of here. He's a good friend. And we started walking out. And the next thing I know, I wake up and I'm lying face down on the floor and somebody's checking my pulse. And
these gummies are nothing to laugh at.
Don't
honestly,
don't mess with the gummies.
Don't do drugs.
So,
kids.
but this was one of two times. This is
no. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Don't worry about the second. He was proving the first time, making sure it wasn't an accident.
I learned my lesson. I'll never do that again.
Don't worry about it.
I'll never do that again.
So
again.
funny.
Yeah, I was doing that whole thing where I felt like I was falling asleep, but
I can't believe you did a wedding. You're crazy.
I had
Jeez.
250 plus people staring at me, and I'll never forget the way I figured it out. It had happened to me a couple minutes earlier. Well, 30 minutes earlier in the elevator. I just had like this sensation that an earthquake had just happened, and I didn't know how long ago it was, but I just felt, the earthquake. And so then the wedding starts, and I walk my grandmother up to the front, drop her off. The groom and all of the groomsmen are following me. And as the music goes to change from the bridesmaids to the bride, right, my cousin, all of a sudden it's like my head went 4 feet forward and came back 4 feet. And I thought, and then I looked down at my notes, right, and I thought, I'm back in Hebrew class. I think I'm supposed to read left to right, but it looks like I'm supposed to.
Oh my gosh.
It was bad.
That's intense.
Yeah. So speaking of our journeys into the unknown, raised in an evangelical household.
Ish. I grew up nominally Christian. We were American, therefore we would call ourselves Christian. My dad was born and raised Southern Baptist. His parents are from Alabama, but he grew up in Chicago. And my mom grew up Catholic. And so I wouldn't have called them evangelicals growing up. They became more evangelical as I got into that, becoming at the time what I would call a born-again Christian. Yeah. So kind of went to church off and on, was the oldest of eventually 4 kids. My siblings are 7, 10, and 19 years younger than me, respectively. Whoa. My parents had me, got married, got divorced, and then got back together when I was like 6, and then had my sisters, then had my brother when I was in college. So it was chaotic. It was a chaotic growing up experience, and I just got in my head, like, be good.
Yeah.
Get good grades. Don't have sex before you get married. Don't do drugs. Don't, be a good kid.
All of these things that...
I was a good kid.
Yeah.
And so when I was in college, I was introduced the idea of what I now understand as the gospel.
Sure.
Which is that you're a sinner, and there's something broken in you. This thing is called sin, and you need Jesus to fix this thing.
Right.
And there was no convincing. Like, I didn't need to be convinced of this. Like, I knew that there was something wrong with me. And so when somebody told me what it was, I was like, great, let's get on with it.
Let's fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And so would you identify with Christian now? Where has your journey taken you?
I've wrestled with this a little bit. I think that I don't like labels, which is like a real dodgy thing to say. I don't believe in labels. If I have to take a label, I like mystic. I feel more spiritually in tune than I've ever felt. But I think if somebody wants to have that conversation, I live in Tennessee now. When I grew up in Chicago, Christian meant one thing. Now that I live in the Bible Belt and have been immersed in a lot of evangelicalism and even like charismatic traditions, that means something to me. The term Christian, from my experience of the past 20 years of being in that world, means something different. So I think I'd have to ask somebody, tell me what that means to you, and then I'm happy to answer if I identify with that, yes or no.
Yeah. Do you feel as if, I know I have an answer to this. Do you feel as if there is the space to call yourself a mystic without freaking out a lot of your lifelong quote unquote Christian friends?
I think it depends on the person. I know that when I started to experience what some people call deconstruction, which I would rather call awakening, a spiritual awakening, an awakening to a deeper reality, because it didn't feel like I never felt like I was walking away from something. It felt like I was going deeper into it.
Right.
And I was seeing another dimension. I was seeing another aspect of it. There's this old Jewish concept of the scriptures being a 70-faceted diamond. And the goal of the community, the Jewish community, as I understand it, I'm not Jewish, I have some friends who are rabbis, but that the goal of the community is to keep turning scripture, truth, your understanding of truth, and you keep looking at adding it from a different angle and understanding a different facet of it. And I felt like that's what I was doing. I was just kind of turning things. All that to say, I was afraid, deeply afraid that, the witch hunts were going to come after me. And
sure.
Going through something like a divorce, the community that I came from had strong judgments about that, strong opinions about that. And I had a few people come at me pretty hard and say some not nice things. But I was actually surprised by how many people have been like, oh, that's where you're at now, or that's what happened to you, or that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Cool. So a lot of that was my own projection. It was my own. When I'm afraid of somebody judging me, it's usually because either I judge that, or there's a younger version of me. Like, I was afraid that people were going to judge me for getting a divorce, not going to church anymore, like
sure.
doing these things that I 5 or 10 years ago would have previously deemed as important. Or if you don't do those things, you're a bad person.
So when we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason here on Emotionships, that's a great example where you would feel the guilt or not be able to live into an old belief and therefore judge that when you see it in the life of the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so how much of, if at all, this dark night of the soul or deconstruction or awakening, how much do you think that influenced your divorce in your marriage?
I don't know. I mean, it probably influenced it. There's, I can't imagine, being a hardcore evangelical Christian and feeling good about going through with something like that. Because it was, at the end of it, pretty much my decision. But I don't know. I do remember the experience happening sort of concurrently, meaning my worldview was shifting and I was trying to figure out, what do I think about things? And really, you call it deconstruction, but for me it was just like, I just started asking why. Like, I had a conversation with my kids the other day and they said the word but, B-U-T-T, is inappropriate.
Yeah.
Because we were listening to Sir Mix-a-Lot or something on the radio.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And we just had an interesting conversation about it. Where, somebody had told them that you're not supposed to use this word, and they just had this vague notion that it was
sure.
like wrong, without really understanding, well, what happens if I do this? What is the consequence of this
right.
particular action? And so my experience was, one, I got everything that I thought I wanted in life, more money than I thought I needed, more success and fame than I ever imagined having. And I did this year after year after year, hitting income goals, hitting bestseller lists. And it wasn't awful and it wasn't amazing. It was just kind of like, oh, and I still felt like me. And so I began to question,
which me was what?
Oh, this guy that it really was this 8-year-old chubby redhead kid who didn't have a lot of friends, and I was like carrying him around the world going, isn't he cool? Don't you think he's cool? People go, well, and I'm like, how dare you? Like, I'll prove it to you. He's awesome. Like, that's what was going on with me psychologically, psychodynamically. And so I felt the need to protect this person from the harshness of the world. And I did that through achievement. I achieved my way into feeling loved and accepted, and it didn't work. And so at that point I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to I'm going to stop. And it did. So this unfolding began to happen. And the question was like, what else have I been believing is true that may not be true? Or what am I doing and I don't know why? Like, one of those things was going to church. Yeah. And I asked my friends, why do you go to church? So they're like, well, we learn things there. And I was like, I don't actually learn. I wasn't learning anything. I was hearing the same old things I'd heard before in new ways. Right. But I accept that some people learn a lot in that sort of setting, but I wasn't. I wasn't learning new things. I was just hearing old things rehashed. And they go, I go to connect with God. And that wasn't happening either. That was happening for me in nature. I was going for a walk out in the woods or sitting on my back deck drinking a glass of bourbon or something at night, just looking up at the stars. And I was having transcendent experiences, but they were happening outside of the church. And I had this guilt, because I'd heard, growing up, I'm sure I heard my dad or somebody say, I can worship God in the woods, and it's like, yeah, but you're drinking beer on a Sunday watching the football game. You're not actually doing that. It was just a way to get out of going to church. And I was like, am I that guy? Am I doing that? But I realized all the reasons that people were going to church, worship, community, and connection with the divine. Those were things that I was getting elsewhere or just not experiencing in that setting. So I was like, I think I'm going to just stop for a while and see what happens. And I began to run these series of experiments where I was doing these things and I didn't know why. I was eating a certain way, abstaining from a certain kind of activity, spending time with this kind of person over that kind of person. And I didn't know why, except that I was just programmed to do this. And I began to consider, what if some of the things that I think are bad or not good for me or dangerous, what if they're not? Like, what if they're okay? Yeah. And this started this process of me experimenting with that. And one of those things was marriage and the difficulty of building a life with someone and deciding, is where we were headed where we want to go? And that was a really hard decision. And so the things kind of happened at the same time, or there was layers. But I just began to woke up to the fact that I had created a life for myself that I didn't actually want and hadn't wanted for some time, but I was not courageous enough to admit it to myself. And when I began to admit it to myself, certain things started to fall apart and certain relationships stopped working because I stopped performing in order to get love, So like, if you don't need to do something to get love and you can just be loved, you can be okay, which is what I was beginning to experience as I let go of all of my dogma, was not that I was empty and some sad dude, but I was like, oh, this is joy. This is peace. This is a peace that passes all understanding. And as I began to experience that, it threatened relationships where there were unspoken agreements about, well, if I do this for you, then you'll give me this. And I was like, well, I don't actually need that from you anymore. So what do we build from here? And the answer was, we don't. We move on and build something else.
I have a quick question. Can you, look in retrospect, can you pinpoint the origin of your questioning? Like, what spurred it? Is it just that you seem like a very self-reflective person. So was it just do you feel like you just woke up one day, or did you read something or have a conversation or something that spurred this particular part of your journey?
I had a feeling for many years that something was missing, that John Mayer song, something's missing and I don't know what it is. And that, I identify a lot with the Enneagram 4 energy, which is like the deep fear of the 4 type is that there's something missing in you and everybody else has it. There was a moment, 2017, maybe 2018, where things were feeling off and I didn't know why. And I had a life that lots of people said was great, you should be grateful. And I was underwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And every year I would set a goal. I would try to make double the amount of money that I'd made the previous year. I would do it, and I would end the year feeling like something was missing. And I would double the number again, do it again. I did this 3 or 4 years in a row, and eventually I was like, why am I doing this? What am I missing? And I had a conversation with my friend Ian Cron, who's a priest and a psychotherapist, and we were hanging out on his deck one late spring night in Franklin, Tennessee. And I said to him, maybe I need to start a new business. Maybe I need to write this kind of book. Maybe I need to quit this old thing that I'm doing and do this new thing. And he said, I don't think that's it. I think there's something deeper going on here. And he suggested the idea that I do some trauma work. And so I started kind of looking into trauma, understanding it, seeing that, that I had a lot of things going on in my body and in my mind and spirit that suggested to me that I, had some trauma to work through. And I had a friend who had kind of gone through his own little spiritual deconstruction, and we would have lots of conversations where I was trying to win him back to the fold. Like I was trying to be a good friend and be there for him. And what ended up happening was he would ask these questions and I would go, that is a good question. And I had friends who would have doubts and, something would happen. They'd get a divorce or they'd have a crisis of faith or whatever. And I would expect the church to be what I thought the church was, which was, recklessly loving and affirming of all people, regardless of what they believe or who they are. And I kept seeing not that. I kept seeing rejection and judgment. And I was like, I thought I was a part of something else.
Well, it's interesting to think about that because we've had a season. I think a lot of evangelical churches have experienced where a portion of their congregation starts to go through something like this.
Yep.
And one of the things that's really heartbreaking to me is that we don't give people the space to question and process their questions, their fears. I mean, it's also interesting, building on that thought, looking at your story and walking beside others that have gone through this, how in the church we often act as if or process freedom to be an absence of certain things in our life. Like I'm free because I'm not doing these things, but yet we're so bound by programming and doing things that we don't even have an idea as to why we're doing them. That's not freedom either.
No.
And yet there seems to be such a lack of space. I mean, when you hear someone say that I'm having a dark night of the soul, or I'm going through this, or I'm deconstructing, I mean, the general response from a card carrying evangelical, I won't say Republican.
You did.
Oh, it's a little trick. It is, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you?
Right.
Yeah.
Which talk about unhealthy for everybody.
Going back to your question, Mallory, I was just kind of seeing this happen, or somebody would come out as gay, and you'd expect people go, "I love you no matter what," and there was all this kind of judgment and gross stuff, and I started to wonder if the thing that I thought was the exception, which was these religious people judging and rejecting people who disagreed with them, like, is this the exception or is this actually the norm? I understood it as the exception, and I started to see it more as the norm, unfortunately. This is just my experience. And I was like, I was not settled. I was not okay. I was anxious. I didn't even have words for this, but I was suffering from anxiety, this feeling of not rightness, and I had to go do something to fix it. I had to, read my Bible more, pray more, work harder, give more money away, make more money, work more, work less, like buy a bigger house, buy a smaller house, like doing.
Right.
And I saw everything as this shame-based process for me of I'm achieving something so that I can feel okay, and none of it worked. I never felt okay.
Yeah.
And so I didn't experience that in my work, and so I fell back on what I understood to be God and my spiritual relationship at the time. And I would talk to other friends, and I would go, "Are you okay? Am I okay? When do we get to be okay? I've been baptized. I've been baptized in the Holy Spirit. I've been, fully immersed. I've spoken in tongues. I've healed people. I've rolled down the aisle. I've let them push me down and catch me, even when I didn't really faint, but I felt like I had to go along with it anyway. Like I've done all the things."
Yeah. What do I lack?
When do I get to be okay? Because I didn't feel okay.
No.
And I would talk to friends about it, and I would go, like the New Testament says this, right? Like it says like we're more than conquerors and co-heirs with Christ, and the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is living inside of us. So am I okay now? And they would go, yeah. I go, so I can do whatever I want then, huh? Well, I mean, you still could be a really evil, wretched, depraved person, so like don't trust yourself. And that really started to bother me because it felt disingenuous. It's like you're good, you're forgiven, you're redeemed, there's goodness in you. And like, don't trust yourself. Don't do what you want because that's selfish, that's wrong, that's sinful. It just didn't make sense to me. It's like, if I actually got God inside of me, then I should be able to trust what I want to do. And I was so tired of making decisions and then questioning them and feeling bad about no matter what I did. And I realized pretty quickly that the people that I knew that were pretty far along in this, path of being a Christian were just as lost, seemed to be just as lost as I felt. Yeah. And I was done. I just eventually got done with trying. I was like, I'm a good achiever. If I could have achieved my way into feeling good enough, I would have done it by now. And so I'm going to go in the other direction. I'm going to stop working. I'm going to stop achieving. I'm going to stop going to church. I'm just going to give myself some space to be. And if I end up, a drunk, drug addict, homeless, lying in a gutter somewhere, then I'll know. Then I'll know that this was a bad path.
Wrong turn.
I'll go back to that. And that's not what happened, I ended up finding this tremendous depth of joy and spiritual experience by letting go of all the things that I thought I needed to be okay.
Yeah. And I often, one of the things that we've said here at City Church, we often don't believe what we read and often what we recite to people, in that if God is the one drawing people to himself and the Spirit is convicting and Jesus is saving, why do we get so upset when we feel like someone else's life doesn't fit the mold or the image we have for them? Why is there no space for people to make it legit and to wrestle with the truth and to go on a journey without being accused of being a heretic or a witch, whatever you're going to say?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And I suppose this happens in other disciplines, but it seems most prominent in religion, which is get to a certain understanding and then never move beyond it. Just stay there forever. Yeah. And that doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work in science. We're always learning new things about science. And, the old guard is always kind of attacking new ideas. It's like the earth. The sun doesn't revolve around the earth. The earth revolves around the sun. That's heresy. You're crazy, And that was actually a religiously informed objection, incidentally. But it actually doesn't make sense to me that the point of being a spiritual person or a Christian is to believe all these things just the right way and do all these things just the right way and get locked into that and just stay there. Yeah. And I know that, the rhetoric is, no, you need to keep growing and, expanding and growing in spiritual maturity. But it's like, well, what if spiritual maturity is like, I no longer believe this thing the way that I used to believe? Well, you can't do that.
Right.
Or what if I think that, there is no hell, or what we've understood to be hell is not what it actually is? Well, you can't do that. So there were like these certain things that, like, once you understood them a certain way, you had to keep understanding them that way. And that's very different from that Jewish understanding of it's a 70-faceted diamond and you keep turning it. And I think what happens when you turn a truth, right? You turn a belief, a concept, and you look at it from a different perspective, it looks like you're throwing the thing away.
Sure.
When in reality, you're just seeing another dimension of it, another aspect of it.
Right.
But it can be very threatening to the person who's standing over here seeing it from that angle. They go, no, it looks like this. And you're like, no, it looks like this. And I do think in any faith tradition, I would even say this is true in politics, having the ability to step back and try to see a bigger picture. And when you can't do that, being able to trust other people's experiences is valid, even if they're very different from my own experiences, and see what we can learn from each other about ourselves and about this thing that we're trying to understand.
Yeah.
That I think actually is the role of a faith community, and more often than not, it seems the role of the community is to keep you in the conditioning, keep
Right.
you in the no, this is the way it works, instead of giving some space to breathe and let new revelations, new ideas, new experiences come in and share them with the community in a way where we're all left better. And I know that's tricky,
Sure.
but that's what I would enjoy.
Well, it comes with liabilities, right?
Of course.
But if God's in control and he's bigger than our mistakes, you would think there's room for the imperfect person or the finite trying to figure out the infinite.
Yeah, you would think that you could trust a little bit more, because we certainly trust this thing we called God to lead a person to a spiritual revelation. But what if that same unction, that same spirit, seems to be drawing you away, or drawing you away from the organization? Sure. We have a problem with that more often than not, in spite of the fact that the tradition supports this.
Yeah.
That Jesus goes away to a desolate place and prays, and many of the prophets find themselves being kicked out from society, imprisoned, cast out, set aside, or they elect to leave. And for many spiritual heroes in the Judeo-Christian story, there's a leaving that happens. You leave the community. You leave what you know, and you go out into the desert and you experience something deep, something mystical, an encounter with that which is ultimate reality, what we call God sometimes. And then you've got to find a way to reintegrate it into the community in some ways. And I don't think in America and in the evangelical church, we do a good job, and I will say we because I've been a part of it for a long time, letting people go for a while. Maybe letting them go for the rest of their lives, and actually trusting that that can be a spiritual path too.
Sure. So we stayed up and talked several hours last night about all of this. And it's interesting because some listening to you on this podcast would say, well, clearly the guy's lost his faith, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But what's amazing to me is I don't know that we've ever had, whether it was right now or last night, such deep spiritual talks that are free and beneficial and are that much more interested in exploring like the depths of this idea of God.
I think, I agree. I'm less hesitant to talk about spiritual ideas because I actually have less to lose. Because I actually don't think you can lose a real thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't lose gravity. I've lost my faith in gravity. Anything that requires my belief in it for it to exist is not a real thing.
Sure.
So it's like, I don't really worry about faith anymore. What do you believe? I don't believe in belief very much anymore. Or rather said, I'm really interested in reality. And I remember having a conversation with somebody where they said, how far are you going to take this? Because I was questioning everything.
Sure.
I was questioning marriage. I was questioning, being a father and being a Christian and making money and living in a house. It's like These are all just assumptions that I have, and I've never like actually gone, is this my idea or is this somebody else's idea? And I'm just repeating it without thinking
you've been
about
living
it.
into it.
And I decided I didn't want to live that way anymore. And so in order to do that, I had to kind of hold up everything that I sort of took for granted and go, is this, because freedom is the ability to choose something freely.
Sure.
That's it. That doesn't mean you do all the things that you felt like you couldn't do, but it means you have the freedom to do it. And that's why people tell me, you're free in Christ. Great. So I can go have sex with whoever I want or drink or do this or do that and I'm okay. Well, you wouldn't really want to do that. Really? I wouldn't? Interesting. Because part of me could probably find a way to kind of want that. And it was just this weird like bait and switch. It's like, you're free, you could do whatever you want, but don't.
Right.
And if you do, you're going to get in trouble.
Isn't the point to get to a place, I think about that it's the goodness of God that leads us to repentance. Isn't the point to get to the place where you realize for yourself what is and what is not, what is good for you, what is not good for you?
I think so. I think freedom is for me is trusting in my own goodness and trusting that I can make a decision. I mean,
Sure.
Anybody who's never experienced childhood trauma may not be able to understand this, but we've all experienced lots of lower, what's called lowercase t, trauma. And I've never been able to make a decision and not question it.
Sure.
So it's very important to me to like do something, accept the consequences of it, and learn from it. And that felt like freedom to me, to actually go, even with like struggling with my weight most of my life, and like eating a biscuit for breakfast and then feeling terrible, and like I had to like go on some diet or run 18 miles to work it off. Like I never could just like be okay. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day in this process of I'd stopped going to church, I kind of had these beliefs that I'd always believed, just going, maybe it's not true. And if it requires me to hold on to it for it to be true, and if I kind of hold my hands up in the air and the wind blows and it blows away, then I don't know if that's something I want to hold on to.
Sure.
And somebody asked me, how far are you willing to go with this? And I said, I as far as it goes. Like I don't have any precious things to protect. I wasn't born a Christian, and I actually kind of came into Christian faith later in life. I had this radical Holy Spirit driven experience when I was 19 years old that shook me to the core. I felt it in my body and I was like, I'm all in on this and I'm going to tell everybody about it. And I committed my life to vocational ministry after that. And this, somebody said, how far are you going to take this? I said, I'm going to take this as far as it goes. And the thing, I studied religion in college, and it was a liberal arts education, and so we were studying all the different world religions. It was not one faith tradition that we were aligning with. It wasn't like a Christian school or something, and we would call God because that was too dogmatic, which at the time felt very like, oh gosh, rolling my eyes at this sort of thing. But we would call God ultimate reality. And actually, I don't use this term very often, but I love that. I love the idea that when God says to Moses, tell them I am that I am sent you. When Thomas Aquinas, one of the great Western philosophers and theologians, he's a Catholic saint, but he's influenced a lot of Protestant theology as well. He said that God is the essence of all being. The essence of being, beingness, isness, the thing that holds everything together, what we might in physics call energy.
Right.
And I began to become really curious about the words that we use to describe the unknown.
Yeah.
And it's like, these are just words. So if you say God and you say energy, but you're describing the same thing and you're just using different words, it's like,
Sure.
If I started calling Charlie Billy, it's still the same person. It's just an abstraction of a reality. And I was like, I'm tired of the words.
Sure.
I'm a writer.
I want some, right.
I don't want the words. I want the thing.
Yeah.
So what's the thing? And I found that when I would ask people, what's the thing? They would tell me about words.
Yeah.
And I had to get
100%.
get away from the world of things or get away from the world of words, theology, words about God, theo, logos, words, theo, God, words about God. I was like, I'm done with the logos for a little while. I'm done with the words. I want it. I want the thing. And that kind of set me off on this path of if I need other people to tell me what this is in order for it to be real, then it's not real for me.
Well, and it doesn't really fit into the Old Testament narrative or the New Testament narrative.
Yeah, and I mean, I was starting to question that too. It's like, we're doing this stuff in church. I can't find it in the Bible. You know, why are we doing this? People go, well, this is just what we've always done. But I don't, like, this doesn't make sense to me. And not just because it's not in the Bible, but just because it's like, I don't even like doing this. It's boring. You know, why is this thing 2 hours long and we're standing up, sitting down, singing this song, giving this money, and just tell me what the point is. You know, when did we get to the thing? I used to lead a Bible study group at my house. We all kind of took turns leading. It was at our house, and we would meet on the picnic table on our back deck. And basically what we would do is we would debrief the sermon from Sunday. So pastor would preach a sermon. We'd get together on Thursday nights and we'd talk about it. And then if we got really motivated, we'd go tell other people about it. We'd evangelize, right? And one day I said, guys, do you realize all we do is talk about talking? They said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you know, according to the Bible, at some point God did something. God intersected with humanity, and somebody wrote it down. That's called the Bible, right? So that's how that works. So we had a good, you know, exegetical, expository preacher who was preaching directly for, you know, read a Bible verse, read a story, and then say, here's what it means, right? Here's what the Bible says about what this means. And so every Thursday night we were talking about something that he had said about something in the Bible. So we were talking about the thing, right? Yeah. The thing that happened in the Bible. And I said, if we get really motivated, we're going to go tell other people about it. We're going to become evangelists. We're going to become missionaries. We're going to tell people about the thing that we just talked about. So we're going to talk about talking about the thing. And they're like, my friends were like, what is your point? Dude, this is what a Bible study. Just calm down. Here, have a glass of wine. Chill out. And I was like, when do we get to the thing? And they go, what's the thing? I said, exactly. I don't know, but I really want to find out.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So do you describe this experience as a dark night of the soul?
I don't know what I found.
It's more words, Mal.
I know.
No, I mean,
I'm
sure,
curious.
that's
I'm curious
fine.
how you describe it, and then I'm curious about. I mean, you say that the level of joy that you're experiencing now. It sounds like it's kind of compares to nothing you've experienced before. Is that a true statement?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt like I was going crazy. A teacher of mine, a guy named Anthony DeMello, somebody whose work I follow, not a direct teacher, he said, you know that you're waking up spiritually when you think, am I crazy or are they?
Yeah.
Because you feel so alone.
Yeah.
I did feel that way. I did feel like I'm losing my mind, and yet this is a thing that is happening to me, not something I'm doing. It just didn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. And I tried to make it work for a little while, and that really didn't work. And I was like, am I just going to spend the rest of my life unhappy, pretending to be somebody I'm
going
not?
Along with it?
Yeah, and I couldn't do that. Being true to myself, being honest is really important. So it felt like I was going crazy. I mean, like, I hired a spiritual director, and I was like, am I losing my mind? She said something to me. She said, this lovely Methodist lady who was trained by these these nuns, and she said, if you're being led by love and you are honestly and earnestly seeking truth, you're okay. You'll find it. You'll be all right. Okay. She said, I can't imagine if you're being led by love that, you know, God would mislead you. And so I remember going for a run one night. This is several months after I saw Ian Cron at, you know, kind of on his deck, and he kind of encouraged me to dig a little bit deeper into this feeling of not rightness. And I went for a run one night, and then I stopped at Whole Foods and got a bar of chocolate because I believe in balance.
Yes.
Way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Way to go.
And he said, how's it going? And all this stuff came out. And I had recently been a part of this Christian entrepreneurial mastermind for 6 years, and I left it because I confessed to this group of men that I didn't feel like I was struggling with my faith. I just felt like I don't believe this stuff the way that I used to believe it. I mean, I didn't feel like a struggle. It was just like, this doesn't make sense. Something's not right. Something's wrong. What's wrong? I don't feel it anymore. And I told one of the guys in the group, I said, I feel like what we do in the church is we sort of, we're treading water, keeping our heads above the surface of the water, trying not to drown. And we are, as we tread water, we are describing to each other what the ocean floor looks like. And we've never seen it. We've heard about it. We think it's down there. We believe it's down there. But we're not brave enough to dive down and see it because you could die. It's dangerous.
Yeah. Or what do you discover down there?
Yeah, or it may not look the way that you thought it would. But up here, we have very good ideas about what's down there. Mm-hmm. And I said this to a group of guys, and the guy goes, well, that's cool, you know. Just make sure that you're tethered to the dock. I said, the dock? What's the dock? Are we in a lake now? I thought I was in the ocean. You know, he goes, explore, whatever, but just stay tethered to the dock. I'm like, tethered? This doesn't sound exciting at all.
Sounds like a Christian counselor.
This is a former pastor, you know. And I said, what's the dock? He said, the dock is truth. The dock is scripture. I said, oh, you think God is the dock. I think God might be the water. You know, where can I go? What does the psalmist say? Where can I go to escape your presence when I
you're not there?
I ascend to the heights and you're there. I descend to the depths, to Sheol, you know, and you are there. You're with me. And I was just so curious, and I felt curious enough to kind of so I left that group and I run into Ian and I tell him, I go, I'm curious about what's down there. I'm tired of treading water, describing something I've never seen before. He said, you know what's down there, right? I said, I have no idea. He said, everything. I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. And that was kind of the permission that I needed to kind of finally let go of the last thing that I was holding on to, which was like, this is going to be for a while an individual journey. So joy, yes. Sorrow, you know, heartbreak, love, yeah, all of it. It's just, it's real. You know, I'm experiencing another layer of awareness of contact with reality. And instead of trying to get out of reality so much and get somewhere else, get to a spiritual high, feel good, I'm trying to get into this. Now I'm trying to be here for my life and not miss it. You know, the kingdom of God is here now. And the more present I am here to the pain, to the heartache, to the sadness, to the beauty, to all of it, the more I can accept it. And there is a joy that passes understanding that comes with just being okay with wherever you are. But before I could do that, I had to be okay with me. And I had to let go of all the voices that were saying you're not okay. Mm-hmm. And I do remember, I stopped trying. I stopped praying. I stopped doing anything, reading. I was just like, I can't try any harder. I'm just going to be with me and see what happens. And after a couple of months of not trying, I remember one day I realized that I couldn't remember the last time I yelled at my kids. And I thought, why is that? I thought, well, I haven't yelled at them because I'm not angry at them. Why am I angry at them? Oh, because I've stopped trying to control them. Because I've stopped trying to control everything. Now, to be clear, this was a nice little honeymoon period with my new spiritual foray. I have yelled at my kids since then. Let's be real. Yeah. But it was a different way of being. It was like, man, I'm exhausted trying to arrange reality around my expectations. And I like what Byron Katie, a spiritual teacher, says about this. She says, when I argue with reality, it only wins 100% of the time. When you resist what is, which I think is the cause of all suffering, reality is going to win every time. What is going to win every time. Sure. And so when you talk about God's will and all of that stuff, I think a lot of that comes down to trusting in the way things are, accepting them. Doesn't mean that you can't change things. So I'm not talking about being fatalistic. But there is a peace that comes with just going, all right, this is okay. All is well. Even when things look like a mess, something good is happening here.
You know what's so interesting is I've first met you, I don't know, a couple of years ago. But I don't know you super well. And I can see like this trip when you got to Dayton yesterday. I mean, like physically you look different, right? Like your beard's grown out, your hair's a little bit longer than the last time I saw you. Like your face is different, but like your face is different. And just before we started recording, I saw on your Instagram stories that you posted a picture of your face. And I can see in the selfie that you see yourself different. Like, there's something about the look like in your eyes that I can tell that you know yourself in a different way or see yourself in a different way. And it's like, it makes me emotional. Like, it's a really like beautiful unfolding that from the outside looking in, like I don't know you super well, but I can see it. And it's just really remarkable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't like myself. And I really don't think I can give other people the love I'm unwilling to give myself. It ends up being control. It might look like love, but I'm trying to control you. When I actually love and accept myself, I can be way more present with somebody else because I'm not trying to get anything from you.
Sure.
I'm not trying to get you to like me so that I can like me, which never worked before, but that's what I would do with everybody. Right. Let me perform, let me please, let me do something to get you to give me something you can't give me, which is my own acceptance of myself. Right. And so what's ironic is I had to let go of this idea of God to really find divinity, within me, a spirit of love that challenge. It was more grace than I ever could have imagined. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do think that the idea of God actually keeps us from the reality of God. The idea of anything keeps it. Like the idea of what I think you are keeps me from the reality of experiencing you as you are. We don't see things as they are. Anais Nin once wrote, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Right. Everything is a projection. Mm-hmm. And so when you begin to see yourself as you are, I do think you get to connect more deeply with people and things and problems and situations and be more accepting of them. And you can't love something you haven't accepted.
So how would you describe the reality of what we call God? Let me build a little bit around it, and maybe you'll want to take a specific angle. Like looking at all that has happened this year, in addition to the pandemic, and how everybody is charged the way they are. Like in your mind, how do you process and understand evil? And maybe you start off with, what do you say to the person that says, through a traditional evangelical approach, the guy's been taken captive, right? The guy's deceived. He's entertaining deceiving spirits. What do you do? What do you do with that?
Okay, thanks for sharing that. It's like, there's no, like, I'm not interested. Okay, great. That's what you think. Cool. Sure. It's like, it's none of my business what you think about me. So, what do I do with evil?
What do you do with the idea of evil?
I don't know. It seems to me, I believe that everybody's doing the best that they know how to do. And some don't know how to do very much at all in terms of good. And so what ends up coming out is very selfish, bad things, what we call bad things. And so I would call that, I think evil is ignorance. You see it, for example, in a politically charged binary America right now. You've got one side saying the other side is stupid or insane or evil. And both sides are saying the same thing. And I've got friends on both sides of the political aisle. Neither side is evil in my experience. But there's a little bit of ignorance of each other's experience, that I'm observing, because I see you and I see you and you guys think each other are terrible. And it's like, but you're kind of great and you're great. You've got this thing and you've got this thing, as rubbing each other the wrong way. I think evil is ignorance, and it doesn't mean that that evil shouldn't be stopped. In the same way that ignorance should be stopped or solved with education. Education means to lead one out of ignorance, is what the term means. Educator is one who leads somebody out of ignorance. Sure. So, I think evil, what we call evil, doing something for, ignorant, selfish reasons, there are consequences for that. And, like Martin Luther King said, you don't drive out darkness with more darkness.
Sure.
I think Einstein said you don't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. So what do you do with evil? You understand it as ignorance. You understand it, you talk about vibration, you understand it on a low vibration of energy, fear, anger. There's, these emotions have different energies to them. And I think what I try to do is look at the world and go, this is the way that things are. And when I let go of the story that things should be some other way, like that is just an idea, because things are the way that they are. And so when I realize the only thing that's causing me suffering is the idea that it should be some other way, and if I let go of that idea, what comes is love. What comes up is love. If you get up every morning at 6 a.m. and we're roommates and you wake me up and it's annoying, like I might call that evil. That's wrong. I don't like it. It should be some other way. Or if you, abandon your kids and run away with a cabaret dancer, I may have an opinion about that. But I'm not you, and I actually don't know how your life should go, but I have opinions about it. I have ideas. And without the idea, there really is no judgment to it. It just is the way it is. People are the way that they are. And I think once we're free to love somebody by accepting them, I think the irony is that love can actually pull somebody out of ignorance. It can energetically move them into a higher state, if you will. And so I would never say, like criminals should, be enforced, or that, the things that we agree as a society are permissible. If somebody violates those things, that there shouldn't be consequences. But evil is a word,
Sure.
and another word might be ignorance, which is we're all trying to do the best that we can. And I think when we love people as they are, even in their ignorance, love drives out fear. Love casts out fear.
The reality that we are trying to describe when we use words like God, do you think that force for good, or that force that is inside of us yet outside of us, that holds all things together, is it intelligent? Is it directed toward people?
I think if we are intelligent enough to notice that there's a force holding all things together and that we are one of those things, how could it not be more intelligent than the consciousness that's noticing it? You know what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
Like, if I am aware of the fact that I'm aware, this is kind of a fun little meta exercise that gets you beyond your temporal experience. Like, I'm aware that I have feelings. I'm aware that I have a physical body. I'm aware that I have thoughts. I'm actually aware, as I say this, I'm aware of the fact that I'm aware. And so there is a consciousness inside me or to me that in some ways seems to be transcendent of thoughts, emotions, and even actions. What is that? And I think the scientific study, what physicists are studying right now, which is the nature of consciousness, is that they can't really find a location in the brain where this is consciousness. This is where consciousness lives. And some physicists believe that consciousness is a force in nature, like gravity. It's just a phenomenon of the physical universe. So when we talk about God, is that another word for energy, another word for consciousness? I can't imagine that me as a conscious, somewhat intelligent being talking about something that in some way is causing me to be and is causing everything else to be isn't somehow as intelligent or more intelligent than I am.
Yeah.
I think that's an Aristotle thing or something. If you could imagine, it's some proof for God. I remember from seminary, but if you could imagine something existing, like if you could imagine an intelligent being existing that made things, because you can imagine it, and therefore sort of requires it to be,
Right.
And I think
you're validating it.
It's validating it, because if you can imagine this thing, well, then there must be something in you that's allowing you to do that. I don't know. It's a bit of a shaky proof for a divine, puppet master, but I think it's intelligent.
And therefore, last night we were talking about processing the difference between good and evil on a scale, right? One end from the other end. Is evil therefore intelligent?
I think a way to think about evil, a term that, people use in the Bible is darkness.
Sure.
And, if you want to talk about energy, my understanding of darkness, of void, of space, is there's no frequency to it. It's actually a void. Everything has a frequency except darkness.
Right.
It's a zero there's nothing happening in the void. There's no vibration. We now understand that the physical universe is really just kind of energy vibrating at different frequencies. You know this?
Yeah.
So darkness is nothing. It's not a thing. It is the space from which all things are created, right? Like there's a void, then there's the singularity. You're talking about the Big Bang. There's a void, there's a singularity. The singularity explodes and creates all of the material universe. All matter comes from one source. So when I think of evil, I think ignorance, evil, darkness, these are all not the presence of something, they're the absence of something.
Sure.
The farther I get from the sun, the colder I get, in terms of planets. The farther away I get from source, from the thing that holds everything together, the less life, the less love there is. And so I think in my mind, I grew up with this idea of like a malicious, evil presence, a Satan, an accuser, a bad guy who is intentionally, willfully trying to make things bad. Now I think that what we call evil is really due to a lack of knowledge, a lack of love. It's the same thing that happens to your body. As you get farther away from your birth, you lose vitality. Things at a certain age start to fall apart, not work as well. Is that evil? I mean, is that bad? No, that's just this force in you kind of like losing its luster. The battery's losing charge. That's how I think of evil.
And so then what do you do with the biblical narrative? What do you think they were trying to describe with wrestling not against flesh and blood as an example, or Satan roaming around like a lion?
I mean,
what in their vernacular, what
Sure.
What do you think they were trying to describe?
One, I don't know. I mean, I like, let's just, I don't know. I have ideas about that. I'm
Sure.
not certain about those ideas. Sure. I do think that some of the realities that are talked about in the Bible are myths, and myths are not stories that are not true. Myths are stories that help us understand a deeper truth about reality. And the myth itself may or may not have actually factually happened, but the point of the story is not that this happened. The point of the story is to understand our world as it is. So the point of the creation myth of Adam and Eve, and you see it in the story, is this is why women have pain in childbirth. It says that, right? This is why there are thorns and thistles. This is why you're going to find life kind of difficult, right? This is why we have serpents. There's a bunch of, there's metaphor. I mean, these myths are rife with metaphor on purpose. Myths are stories that ancient cultures and even sometimes modern cultures use. They tell stories to help us understand our reality. So myths are not about then, they're about now. So a roaring lion ready to destroy every good thing in your life, I get that. I feel that inside of me. I've got that. I often think of what we call sin and evil as ego, which is the illusion of separateness. Ego is the idea that I'm me and you're you, and we're not the same. We're different. Ego is a necessary personality evolution, because babies don't have egos, not really. It's something that's developed, and you see it in children. We're all parents. We've seen that in our kids. They start out very innocent. They start out very open. You get to 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. There is those preteen years. There's an attitude, and teenage years are especially this way, which is like total rebellion against the authority, because what they're trying to develop is a sense of self. And so when we don't wrestle against just flesh and blood, we wrestle against powers and principalities. These, to me, are all descriptions of what's happening inside of us internally. Are there spirits that are warring for our souls? Gosh, I don't know. Maybe there's, a lot of the universe is invisible. It's dark matter and energy. So are there other beings? Are there other forces that are affecting and influencing the way things are? I have no idea. It would make sense to me that they are. And all I know, C.S. Lewis talked about this, we all receive a parcel. Fun little story. I once translated this story from Mere Christianity for a group of about 500 youth group students, but C.S. Lewis being a good Brit talking about parcels, I'm like, they're not going to understand this. I'm going to use the word package. So in front of a bunch of high school students, I go, God the postman in the story delivers a package to me, delivers a package to you, delivers a package to you. And I don't know what your package looks like. I just know what my package looks like. But, I can imagine what your package looks like.
I'm sure they loved it. I'm sure that went over really well.
And I had an altar call and nobody came and I didn't understand why.
Yeah, they were still stuck on the package. What happened?
The 40-year-old female youth leader came up to me and she's like, good sermon. Maybe next time, don't use the word package. Yeah. And I was like, oh, man. Yeah. Anyway, we're all giving up. Lewis says, we're all just giving a parcel, and that parcel is called myself. And as I begin to, when I open that part, oh, God. There's no recovering from that. When I open the parcel, I see, I experience myself. As I understand myself, I understand other humans better. And as I experience myself, I don't know exactly what it's like to be you or exactly what it's like to be you, but you're a human, I'm a human. We all have this sense of personality, this sense of self, of separateness. As I understand my separate self, as I go into my ego, as I understand all of the different things that are influencing me as a person, I'm connecting to personness, and as I do that, I begin to be able to relate to other people. So I don't know, but all I have is me. Really, I have me in kind of the observable universe, and so my deep spiritual work is to understand myself. And people call that navel gazing and selfish and all that. And that's fine, but I don't know what else to do. It's just me here, just me experiencing the me universe, and I don't see things the way they are. I see them the way I see them, and they're not the same way that you see them. And so the best practice that I know is to get really honest and try to see in myself and explore and grow and experience and then compare it. Here's what I'm learning. What are you learning? Yeah. And that's how we grow. So I will say I'm not super scared of some evil force that's coming after me. It's like going into a dark room and being afraid of the dark. That makes sense, but that's just based on the idea that there's something here and there's not something here. There's nothing here. That's what darkness is, nothing.
So what do you say, as we move toward wrapping this up, to the person that has a similar background to yours, that has been in the church or a part of a religious expression for a very long time, and this makes them really nervous?
I would say do whatever makes you happy.
You just made it so much worse.
I know. And here's the thing. I heard people say that, and I was like, but it's not about being happy. It's about being holy. And I had all the objections, and I realized that I was objecting to ideas without ever taking the time to consider them. And somebody told me that if you immediately have an answer to a question that you've never been asked before, right, that challenges the way you see the world, and you immediately feel emotional and you've got a response to it without actually taking the time to process it, that's the same thing as being brainwashed.
Yeah.
If you're an anti-Trump person, and I tell you something good that Trump has done, and you are immediately going to dismiss it without considering the possibility that it's true, you're brainwashed.
You literally just won half of the people you turned off back.
Of course.
Welcome back.
They now endorse your message.
Yeah, right. And at the same time, if you're a hardcore Trump supporter and somebody says something to you that challenges your belief that this is a good person or the best president ever, or whatever you believe is true about this person, and the thing that they say could be true, and you don't take time to consider the veracity of it, the potential truthfulness of it, you feel an emotion and you respond from that emotion, you're brainwashed.
Yeah.
And so if I say, do whatever makes you happy, and you immediately have an emotional reaction, that's called being triggered. When you get triggered, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance. What happens often is the back of your brain, the amygdala, the less evolved animalistic part of your brain, what's sometimes called the lizard brain, releases chemicals. It's a cocktail of chemicals. Yeah. It's called being emotionally flooded. And in that moment, you are irrational. Ever have a conversation with your spouse and you're getting angry, scared, whatever, and you've got this fight or flight thing going on, and you just want to be right in that moment, you're flooded, and you're not going to make a good decision in that moment without being able to emotionally self-regulate. So what would I say? I would say do what makes you happy, and if that bothers you, I would get really curious about it, because it bothered me too. And I thought, why would I subscribe to a belief system that is actively making me miserable? Which was true for me.
Sure.
But if the way that you see the world is making you happy, and I think there's two parts of it. If it's making you happy and it's a practical, useful way to kind of like build a life, meaning like if you believe that Jesus is coming back tomorrow, and you're going to buy a bunch of guns and sell all your stocks and live in a hole in the ground with a bunch of canned goods, and then tomorrow comes and goes and Jesus doesn't come, you're like, well, maybe tomorrow. And you keep doing this, and your belief system is leading you to live a life that's actually not useful, it's not practical, and you're not even like it's misinforming you about the future. You might consider changing those beliefs. And if you're believing something that isn't actually useful in your life, and reality, the way things are, it keeps bumping up against that belief system, and you refuse to let it go, what's wrong with you?
Sure.
Like, you're a crazy person. We call that faith. I don't think that's faith. I think that's being brainwashed.
Yeah.
You know, it's like some American soldier getting captured by the Taliban and coming back and being convinced that America is the enemy, and any good thing that America does, you're like, no, it's that, you know, you've got a reason for it. That's being brainwashed. And so I don't care if somebody wants to be a Christian. I don't care if somebody wants to be an agnostic or an atheist. I think my challenge to myself and to anybody else who's brave enough to go there is make sure that the things that you believe are your beliefs.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong with belief. But there is something a little bit immature about taking something that you were told and just holding on to that in spite of what may be going on in your life. And I know lots of people who hold strongly onto this total depravity Christian narrative that I'm a piece of crap, and no matter how hard I try, I'm always going to be a piece of crap. God is good and I am not, and I'm doing better than I deserve, and all this nonsense that just leads to a lot of shame. And I had a lot of shame, and I wasn't a nice person to other people because I was trying to get them to make me feel better about myself. Now that I've released that narrative or let go of it a little bit, I'm able to contribute better things to my own life and to the lives of other people. And so I would just take a moment and go, is what you believe really what you believe, or is it what mom and dad told you to believe, or your grandparents, or your preacher, or your politician? And you haven't even taken the time to decide if this is something that you want to own for yourself.
Yeah.
That's called being an adult.
How much do you, so you said anybody who's brave enough to go there, because it's a pretty uncomfortable place, right? To kind of explore something other than what you were raised.
Yeah, and I wouldn't use the word raised, because I mean, I wasn't raised to believe these things, but I was a part of a community where it was not okay to not believe these things. And so it'd be the same thing as going, I might, like, socialism might make a lot of sense. There's a group of people that would be like, yeah, totally. There's a group of people that would be like, no, that's terrible. And anytime you're a part of a community and you have an idea that threatens the way things are, there's got to be a reaction.
So I'm curious, how often these days do you feel like uncomfortable?
I feel more comfortable than I've ever been. How often do I feel uncomfortable? I think I sometimes feel uncomfortable if I'm in a setting where I feel judged because it's clear the person is judging me, or I just make up like, this person surely isn't going to accept me like this. I still have a fear of being misunderstood. But
within your own journey, take other people out of it. Like, you use the imagery of like exploring the ocean floor.
Yeah.
That sounds uncomfortable, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying being uncomfortable is not a bad thing, but it's a thing. And I'm curious, as you continue on this journey, do you feel the level of discomfort that you felt when you started it, or have things sort of settled for you? Has being uncomfortable become like the norm?
It feels pretty comfortable to me, because I used to be in a small little room with a bunch of doors. This is metaphor. I used to be in a small room with a bunch of doors, and all these doors, 100 doors, and they go, do not enter, do not enter, do not enter. And I'd kind of walk up to the door. I'd sniff the door and go sit down. I'd walk up to the door, kind of like push it a little bit and go sit. I was obsessed with the door. Yeah. Well, I've gone through a season of my life for the past few years where I've knocked down a bunch of these doors, and I open the door and I go, just a bunch of old trophies in here or whatever. Yeah. That's what that looks like. That's what it's like to eat biscuits every day for 2 weeks and get heartburn. Now I know. Yeah. Now I know, instead of don't do that, don't say that, don't think that, don't be that. The more doors I open in my life, and I will say it's a very uncomfortable experience to put my hand on the knob. It's a very uncomfortable experience to be on the surface of the water, and all you've ever known is water and air and oxygen, and then you go down where you don't have where you don't have gills and can't breathe the water like that. The initial plunge is uncomfortable until you realize I can swim, and I'll go as deep as I can and then come up for air. And that's my experience of, say, spirituality now is I'm going to dive deep as I can. And when it starts to get, I think this is as far as I can go right now. I kind of come back up, take a deep breath, and then go back down. And it's beautiful. The ocean is beautiful. Nothing to be scared of.
Just staying with your analogy here for a second, the idea of the signs on the doors, who put those there?
I know. It's like I woke up in a room and I'm like, who the hell put all these signs here? And I don't, that's the thing, is we're all born into a world where there's all these doors and all these signs on them. And the signs are not just put there by religious institutions. They're put there by parents. They're put there by political powers. They're put there by economic powers. And these are not bad.
Sure.
These are just abstractions. There's reality and then there's abstractions. Words about reality, words about God, words about a thing are not the thing. Charlie is not you. Right. That's a name.
Yeah.
You could change your name and still be Charlie. Every 7 years, your cells completely change. There's still something you, even though this body is completely chemically different. So what is the you? I mean, that's a bit esoteric, but so many of us have been given ideas about. It's like my kids. It's like, here, eat this food. I don't like that. Have you ever tried this before? No, but I don't like it. Nice try.
Yeah.
We do that. I don't like it.
All the time.
And you've never even considered it.
Yeah.
I don't want to live that way anymore. And some people would call that sinful. Some people would call that licentiousness. And
wow.
What?
I know.
People don't call it that. We don't know what that means.
Well, you should read the Bible, Mallory, because it's in there.
It's a King James word.
I could spell it. Honey, you're being a little bit licentious today. Could you just cool it with the biscuits?
That was a helpful example.
Yeah, depraved, indulgent, going after the things that feel. It's just like, yeah. I think there are mature ways to be curious about all things, even some of the things that we think are bad. And as a father, as a parent, I don't want my kids doing things that are going to hurt them or hurt other people. But I am okay with them being a little bit curious and me guiding them in the process. Okay, let's see what this is like. Oh, you scraped your knee? I guess now you know, don't you? And I'm not gonna let them get seriously injured or hurt or like killed. But a little scraped knee. Okay, now we know. And if we want to believe that God is a loving, good Father, I think.
That's Chris Tomlin now.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's like Jesus saying, you ask, you ask somebody for this, and they give it to you. How much more would your Father give this to you? It's like you think that somehow God, the creator of the universe, the source of all things, that which holds all things together, is going to hold out on you, isn't going to be guiding you in the process of discovering what is good, true, right, noble, all those things. I trust that more than I ever have, not because there's a bunch of signs on the door.
Sure.
But because I don't think I'm alone in the process.
Yeah. What can we expect from you next several months here? Any projects that you're working on?
Heresy is what we can. Lots of heresy.
You heard it here first.
It's such a funny thing. Yeah, I want to continue to explore. Life. I think I'm finding that I've been doing this work as a writer for 10 years now. I write books and teach online courses for writers and creatives, and I'm moving into the next iteration of that work, which is going to change a little bit. And I'm going to be unpacking some of the things that I'm learning, the doors that I'm willing to walk through now. And just, I think my gift, and I've only recently realized it, but I've heard from a lot of people, is the willingness to go places in myself and in the world and in my work, and then tell you what I discovered. Hey, I tried this and here's what I learned, and you're free to try it as well. But I want to lead with vulnerability and hopefully a little bit of courage, trying new things and letting people know. So yeah, I am going to be launching into kind of some new, broader topics on the nature of interesting ideas and how personal transformation works, and how that affects our creative work. And I don't, part of me doesn't know. I think part of the joy of the journey of diving down into the ocean is going, what are we going to find there?
Yeah.
According to Ian, everything. And that's a lot. So I think I'll just take it one thing at a time.
Good.
It's beautiful.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Episode 38. Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's what you said at the beginning.
I was going to say.